Hello, my name is Asa Ito from Tokyo Institute of Technology. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful event, and I'm very excited to be with all of you who are joining it. From now, I will give you a lecture titled Seeing the World from the Perspective of the Blind. In this lecture, I will talk about 3 different projects which were conducted with visually impaired people, and I'd like to introduce some observations to reframe disability through art and design. Let me start my talk by introducing myself briefly. My research background is in the field of aesthetics. I don't know if aesthetics is a major academic field in your country or not, but aesthetics is a discipline closely related to philosophy. Aesthetics is a word-based research like philosophy, but unlike philosophy, it deals with something that are hard to put into words. The philosopher might pose questions such as, what do we mean by time? Or what is existence? But we focus on the much more vague or ambiguous fields of human experience, such as our physical sensations and the emotions or the feelings evoked by works of art. I call my research field differently abled aesthetics, which focuses on the different physical experiences of people with disabilities. Look at these 2 chairs. One has 4 legs and the other has 3 legs. If you see the 3-legged one from the perspective of the 4-legged one, you may feel that the 3-legged one is deprived of 1 leg and it needs to be fixed. However, the 3-legged one is standing there in its own way and it lacks for nothing. We should respect the fact that if everyone has a way of standing, no matter if it may look weird compared to your experience. The same things can be said with respect to disabilities. We tend to think that the body of someone without impairment is a complete whole, whereas the body with impairment is an incomplete one, from which some kind of function is somehow missing. However, one's own body is something that generates a unique meaning in terms of its relationship to the surrounding environment. The 19th century Estonian biologist Jakob von Uexküll called the unique awareness of the world that each being has unveiled. Compared with how humans would perceive a flower garden, when a bee perceives the same flower garden, it is likely that only the flowers that hold nectar would stand out from the point of view of the bee. In other words, von Uexküll hypothesized that how the environment is viewed and its significance differ between living beings with different bodily characteristics. Each human has unveiled according to their bodily characteristics too. Once, a man in his 50s who had lost his eyesight explained the journey from the station to his home to me. He wrote about the journey in the following way. I crossed the road, then followed the road straight for around 100 meters and come to the smell of unagi restaurant on the right. As I continue, I then smell a tofu shop. His method for understanding the street relies on using elements that he can grasp by senses other than sight and as landmarks as it were, and tracing each of these points to this destination. This is his unveiled as a person who is blind. Blind people are not sighted people minus sight. Blind people can see through communication. Another man who had lost his eyesight when he was young had never seen the picture of Beethoven, but knows the man's stern face. How, you may ask? It is because the other children used to tell a school ghost story that his eyes light up at night, and he is looking this way. He said he had experienced Beethoven's look based on their information. There is an interesting subplot to this story. I am sure many of you know this, but Beethoven was not actually a man with such a stern face. The 19th century, when Beethoven was active, was a period wherein artists were considered to be genius with a special talent who lived in an entirely different world from normal people. Thus, the image depicted in the famous picture of Beethoven was an artist as a stereotype in that period, and Beethoven himself was a man with a much more mild face. This suggests that what is seen is not always the truth. Eyes tend to see what we want to see. The reframing of disability requires a reframing of what is thought to be able-bodied. I would like to show you three example projects that were trying to offer a new perspective to redefine our ability to see. One, verbal imaging museum tour with visually impaired people. The first example is a special program called a Verbal Imaging Museum Tour with visually impaired people. This is a program for sighted and visually impaired to enjoy exploring artworks together. The team of attendants is comprised of about 6 people, including those who are visually impaired and those who are sighted. You work with your team members and arrive at the assigned artwork and discuss it. In this program, a visually impaired staff member facilitates the discussion. Each work is admired for about 20 minutes, and then you move on to the next. People never touch a work during the program, but they exchange words. Traditionally, visually impaired people enjoy art by touching it. The museum offers a variety of programs specially designed for visually impaired visitors, which enables them to touch a three-dimensional model of artwork or the work itself. Using this type of program may have the benefit of helping visually impaired individuals correctly perceive the physical features of the work. However, it is important to distinguish perception from appreciation. To perceive a work of art is to understand its physical aspect. On the other hand, to appreciate it is to enjoy its aesthetic value and develop your subjective impression. Touching objects and concentrating on their physical aspect tend to prevent people from developing such an aesthetic attitude. The Verbal Imaging Tour is designed so that sighted people do not have to explain the work to blind people. Kenta Hayashi, who is the designer of the program and has held it in many museums around Japan, says, I always encourage the sighted participants to discuss 2 things. The first thing is objective information, such as the size of the painting, its color, its motif, etc. The second is in visual things, your thoughts, memories, and impressions. It is all subjective meaning. Whenever someone tells you to express your subjective meaning, the conversation becomes filled with metaphors. The visually impaired may hear contradictory metaphors as the discussion proceeds. Each participant's culture and personal background is crucial for understanding their metaphors. The verbal imaging tour can be described as appreciation through others. Let us take an appreciation of Tadanori Yoko's work, Bride, as an example. In the center of the picture, a woman is wearing a bride's headdress. So, at first, general comments like beautiful woman were heard. However, when they looked at it more and more, they started making comments that drew on their own background. For example, the gown shape formed by the thumb and index finger is called man's scissors for rock, paper, scissors. But that is an expression that only people living in certain areas of Japan would understand. One of the objectives of verbal imaging tour is to reach a conclusion by working together with other participants while recognizing and acknowledging each of the differences in this way. After observing some impressive elements of the bride, a participant said, "I do not find this woman beautiful. This figure seems very self-assertive for a woman in the 1960s. I'm wondering if it is a woman. It has a well-defined nose, like a bridge. Don't you think this figure is a man disguising himself as a woman?" Then another participant agreed. "You are right. Its breasts don't seem real. He must be wearing a trompe-l'oeil t-shirt with a printed image of breasts." The visually impaired staff and participants are not passive listeners. One of them asked, "It's very confusing for me. Please help me understand why the painter wanted to paint a transgender bride." Then a sighted participant answered, "I guess Yoko wanted to express the woman with a taste of mischief, who would not live up to the ideal image of a bride held by a man." Of course, this is not a definitive interpretation of the work, but a hypothetical one. What is important for the verbal imaging tour is the process of co-appreciation. They co-create their interpretation through their different points of view. The non-physical aspects of the work is important, so the visually impaired are welcome to engage in the discussion. They can also deepen discussions because their point of view is sometimes unexpected to the sighted. In that sense, disability becomes a catalyst. What we thought we shared is not actually shared. When people with disabilities join in, the atmosphere becomes significantly active and creative. I find it extremely interesting that the disability can fulfill such an important role. This collaborative process of appreciation benefits from the gap of information and perspectives between participants. A blind man says, "The verbal imaging tour taught me that having sight does not always mean to be superior. The sight does not assure them of the correct answer. The sighted can be blind." Here, the word and the and the practice of seeing appear to lose their literal meaning. This concept should not only be limited to its physiological and literal meanings, but also extend to its cultural and metaphorical meanings. As metaphorically understood, seeing can include people who cannot see physiologically. A disability can make us question the literal meaning of a word and lead us to redefine it. 2. Workshop Designing a Country Without Sight. The second project is a 3-day workshop titled Designing a Country Without Sight, which I planned and held in collaboration with the Mori Art Museum, Tokyo in 2016. This project's concept originated from H.G. Wells' short science fiction story, The Country of the Blind. In this story, a sighted adventurer travels the fictional country located in South America, where all the residents are congenitally blind and do not know what it is like to be sighted. Wells described the country with some interesting features. For example, unlike us, people in the country of the blind do not divide a day into day and night, but into warm and cold, because the temperature is much more important for them to understand time than the sky's brightness. I wanted to deepen this fictional setting of the country of the blind to explore possibility of disability and design and suture that we take for granted. In the workshop at the Mori Museum, participants discussed what kind of society it would be if there was a country composed only of the blind. What kind of houses would the inhabitants live in? What would be the national dish, the country's symbol, its laws, means of communication? Moreover, assuming there would be Earth, what form would it take? On the first and second days of the 3-day workshop, the participants were divided into 8 groups of 6, with each group including people with visual impairment and sighted people. Bearing this fictional approach in mind, the participants discussed 8 different topics, such as architecture, food, and laws. Even the visually impaired did not know the answer because they have never been to such a country. The ideas talked about by participants were converted into tangible form as models and samples by 8 experts, including politicians, an architect, a cook, a product designer, and a TV director. On the third and last day, these experts presented what they have made and discussed them with the participants. Here is a short animated movie based on the voices of the participants of the first and second day. Please enjoy this exciting discussion and eye-opening ideas. It will last about 10 minutes.
いいですか。商店街の集まるって今話したじゃないですか、はい、商店街の店っていうのは店、日本語読みだと店なんですよ、うん、店は見せるなんです、うん、だから要するに何か集まってみんなが何かを売ったり買ったりするような集まりがあるとしたときに、例えば見せる盲人国だから 見せるっていうのではないんですよ、だけど聞かせるのかもしれないし嗅がせるのかもしれないし、なんかそういうふうなことを手がかりにしていくと、どういうふうに集まってどういうふうにコミュニケーションしてるのかっていう話ができるかもしれないなというふうに思いました。見せるは店だから、元が盲人国は、盲人国にも店はあるんだろうけど、見せるじゃないじゃないですか。
見せるが語源じゃないから、店という名前ではない。
店という名前ではきっとないだろうなって今ちょっと思ったんです。聞かせとか咲かせとかなんかそういう触らせなるほど。
そうだよね、
何が一番厳格なんですかね。交通ルールが一番厳しい、破ったら罪が重いのか、
危ないっていう、ただそれだけですよね。直結してくるから。でも危ない系がこうやっぱ優先順位が高くなるのが
今見えてる人たちから
そうだね、思うから
危ないっていうのもあるし、実際宣伝的にだったら私もその経験はないから分かんないんですけど、
出して危ないのか。
私、中学高校は盲学校育ちなんですよ。で、自分が育った盲学校っていうのは、例えばちょっとぶつかっただけだと見えない、お互い見えないっていうのは当たり前で、ぶつかるのお互い様だよねっていうのがあるから、ごめんねぐらいで済むんですけど、実際社会に出て肩がぶつかるとそれで喧嘩になることもあるじゃないですか。
そうだね。
そうっす。
盲学校だと大体ぶつかるの当たり前。
目が合っちゃうぐらいの感じですかね。もう気まずいぐらい。
そうかも。
お互いに見えなかったらね、全員が全盲なんだったら、もちろんね、衝突して血が出るぐらいだったらちょっと法律が関わった方がいいと思うんで、
確かに
ある程度はお互い様だよねっていうのが出てくる気がする。
そもそも身の回りのものがなんで身の回りに必要かっていうところだよね。身の回りになんで必要なのかってところだよね。それはやっぱりなんでかな。
鍵じゃない、鍵持ってないと家入れないとか、お金ないと電車乗れないとか、物が買えないとか、確かに
そういう概念があるから、だから身の回りに持ってるんだよね。だけどそういうお金の概念なかったり、部屋に鍵つける概念なければ持たないでいいんだよね。持たないでいいと思います。そうすると究極やっぱり物を持つ、身の回りに持つこと自体が結構歯がゆいから、なるべく持たないような社会だよね、多分ね。
だからそこに行くと、そこに全部準備用意してあるんじゃない？行けば、体一つでそこにやっていけば、必要なものはそこに置いてある。自分のものっていうことじゃなくて。
僕が昔スペインに見えてた頃、スペインに旅行した時に、夜の街に街のところにバルってバーみたいなのがこう立ち飲みスタンドバーみたいなのがいっぱいあって、屋台みたいな感じであるんだけど、そこはみんなグラスがまちまちなのね、ワイングラスが。なんでかっていうと、みんなワインって買うとワインもらうんだけど、立ち飲みしながらブラブラ喋りながら歩いて、飲み終わった時に目の前にあるお店に返せばいいんだって。つまりだからこの店がこのグラスを持つっていうルールがなくて、返したところが今度そのグラス洗ってその店に並べてるから、各店もワイングラスめちゃくちゃなんだけど、飲む側にしてみたらすごく楽で、店で飲んでどこに返してもいいし、お店がそもそも自分でグラス抱えるっていう概念がないんだよね。だからどこのお店でも飲めて、どこの店でも返せる、街全体がスペインワインのやつでそんな感じになったから、そうだから所有物で、だから自分の持ち物って概念じゃないよね。そうなるとみんなで使えばいいから常に持ち歩かないでいいって話になってくるんだよね。
で家に帰らなくても、思ったところが家みたいな、寝たかったら寝ちゃうみたいな。
本当だよね。
どうしよう。戻らなくてもいいから、それすごい。
今のコンパクトシティですよ、コンパクトシティ。2階建てとかはあんまないですか？
階段を上がる必要ない方が
ちょっと邪魔ですよ、邪魔っていうか、なんか障害になりそうな気がする。
目印にもなりますよ
あ、目印。
目印
空間的な目印になる。
階段が
階段がなんか壁とか階段とかって風の流れが変わるからそれが目印になってくる。
そうすると例えば風を人工的にヒューって流しといてそれ区画を作ったりするのはどうなんですか？
それでもできると思います。
面白いかも。
面白い。
そっちの目印があれば別に階段はいらないわけですよね。
そうですね。
今たまたまそうなって
って言葉はないでば。
あ、そうだ。
なんか食印みたいなやつがある。
なんかでもなかなかいいフレーズが
食印を風で作っとくみたいな感じです。
しかも風だったら匂い乗せられますから、この道なんかこの聞いたら匂いでもいろんな匂いの名前ができる。いい匂いでも10個ぐらいいい
なんとかストリートみたいなのが匂いのやつで作れるとかそういう感じです。
じゃあ食印と匂い印みたいな。
そうですね。なんか道っていう概念がなんかそういう流れになる。
風のね、流れになる。
そうですね。
だから多分ジェットエンジンみたいなものを作る業者がすごい儲かるんですよ。インフラだから。
なんか察するとか触るとか感覚とかっていうところがメインになってくると、あんまりその広い世の中って作れない気がして、だからもしかしたら国の大きさみたいなこともそんな大きな国じゃなくてすごく小さな何十人とかわかんないけど何十人じゃないけど、
村みたいなね。
そうそう村、そうそう
文化がたくさんあって、その村一つが国みたいな感じなんじゃないかなとは思うんですけど、
ってなったら高速移動がいらない。
高速移動がいらないから関係があってもその隣と隣の国で、今しかもその国同士の外交はない。
現象を例えばポチャッとかなったとかそういう声なんかあるじゃないですか、擬音語とか。もっとね、触りのベースの音が増えるんですよ。ズルズルとかヌメっていうような類の擬音語がすごい増えるんですよ。
擬色語っていうんですか？そういう言葉は
まあそうですね。まあそういうやつ
っていうのはあるんですけど、
擬態語、
サラサラザラザラとか
そう擬態語みたいなね。
それも擬態語。
擬態語、はい。
出そうだな。
確かにそれはそうかもしれない。
擬態語が膨らむってこと
そうそう、あそこのザラザラの岩のザラザラだったけど、ザラザラの種類でもいろいろあって、なんかザラフワとかなんかザラモゲモゲとかなんかいろいろなやつがあって、ザラモゲモゲの岩の2歩進んだ時にホゲホゲフガのなんか水があってとか、なんかそんな風になる。
ザラザラとズラズラの違いとかが細かくなってくる。
もっと大きなものはじゃあ分かんないですよね。山っていう概念とか、例えば太陽がどう捉えるか分かんない。
太陽は結構感じますけどね。
あったかいそれをなんていうかな、どれぐらい離れてる衛星なのか惑星なのかみたいなってないじゃないですか。その概念自体は多分変わりますよね。あったかいふわふわしたものとか、波も分かんないかな。波は感じれるか。その辺を
大きな現象、自然のものの認識が変わるかもしれない。
変わりますよね。
Okay, so here are some photos of models and samples that are experts made based on people's ideas. This is a sample of jacket designed by product designer. It is full of pockets so that people in a country without sight can carry their belongings such as chopsticks and spoons with them easily. It can be transformed into a chair cover too. This is a haptic communication device designed by the information technology researcher. The device has 6 buttons, and each of them corresponds to a different type of haptic sign. If you push the button for sticking, the sticking-like vibration will be conveyed to your friend through the belt put on his stomach. If you push the button for boom, a boom-like vibration will be conveyed to your friend. The politician gave a speech as a candidate for National Assembly showing his ideas for the new Paralympic Games. Next, 3. Sports guide without sight. The last example concerned sports. Sports Guide Without Sight is a collaboration between Junji Watanabe, Akiko Hayashi, and me since 2018. This project began with the aim of developing a new approach for visually impaired people to enjoy sports games more vividly. However, the goal we had reached was the reproduction of a subjective experience of players using everyday tools, such as towels, that would be accessible to those with and without visual disabilities. For visually impaired people, very live coverage of sports games has traditionally been an orthodox method of watching sporting events. As a flying ball travels through the sky, the commentator in a baseball stadium may describe the sharp line it draws against the blue sky with captivating narration. This type of verbal explanation is indeed popular and useful among visually impaired people, but some have complained that it is insufficient. There are primarily two problems. One problem is that the verbal live coverage tends to be an explanation ex post facto of what is happening in the game. What excites spectators of soccer games is not the fact of scoring a goal, but the process and the expectation leading toward it. Nevertheless, the verbal explanation takes too much time to catch up with the event. Some visually impaired people say that they felt left out amid the crowd-filled stadiums or sports bars because they could not follow the course of the event in detail. The second problem relates to the quality of the information words convey. It must be difficult to imagine what the athlete's jump was like when you hear the athlete jumped. Did the athlete jump like a cat without any preparation? Did the athlete squat down and then jump high like a spring? This movement has infinite nuance, but words cannot describe it all. People with visual impairments may be frustrated by the poor quality of the information. Our first attempt to address this weak verbal explanation was translate judo into towel language using touches and vibration. It is a very straightforward process. The blind spectator holds the center of the towel, which is held by two sighted translators of each judo athlete at both ends. As the athletes move, the towel conveys the struggle and tactics of their movements to the spectators. A blind man claimed that he felt the thrill of live events as if he were part of the action. Although the details of the technique tend to be omitted, this method of translation is good for enjoying the excitement of the game. Our experience reminded us of the importance of the non-visual aspects of sports games. we usually think of sports as something that can be seen, as evidenced by common phrases like watching sports. However, when athletes compete, they also use their auditory and haptic senses. We might be better able to enjoy sports in a more empathetic way if we borrow the perspective of visually impaired people and take non-visual aspects into account. That insight led us to develop the Sports Guide Without Sight project. To create a Sports Guide Without Sight, we interviewed athletes in 12 sports about the sensations they have during their games and tried to translate those using ordinary objects. Let's take the translation of fencing as an example. Fencing hold a foil lightly between their index finger and thumb. Wrist movement are crucial as the foils are very flexible. Through trial and error, we found that entangled wooden blocks shaped like she and Z were a suitable way to convey the sensation of engaging blades and releasing to strike. Both players close their eyes as one attempts to wrest the block from the other.
フェンシング。この競技ではお互いの動きを読み合う駆け引きの要素に加え、親指と人差し指で剣を操るフィンガリングというスキルが非常に重要。この感覚を日用品を使って別の動きに置き換えると、目をつぶる、目をつぶる。剣の代わりに組み合わせたアルファベットを攻撃する側は外そうとする、防御する側は外されまいとする。相手の動きを指先の感覚だけで読み取り、アルファベットを操る。使うアルファベットの形によって戦略が変わってくる。10秒以内に外せたら攻撃側の勝ち。
まずフェンシングというと剣で突くというイメージが強いと思うんですけど、で防御する時は剣で剣を掴みに行くっていうことが、一つの大事な部分なんですね。アルファベットフェンシングはあるものでものをしっかり掴みに行くようなゲームが、非常にフェンシングに似ている武器になりますね。やっぱりフェンシングのゲーム中の一つの大事なポイントである剣で剣を防御する、掴みに行くっていうところの面白さっていうのをもっと知ってもらいたいっていうふうには思ってるので、フェンシングで、剣を操る時にやっぱり指先でうまく操ることっていうのはすごく大事なんですね。アルファベットも指先をうまく使って力が全てじゃなくてちょっと指先でアルファベットの角度を動かしただけでだいぶやっぱ違ってきますし、そういった指先の感覚でうまく探しながらやっていくところはすごく面白い、そういったところ、フェンシングの特徴が一つ現れているところを体験してほしいなと思いますね。お気に入りは、私の一打の頭文字の C が一番のお気に入りですね。
Additionally, this activity can convey a psychological aspect of the game. We tried to translate how a batter leads a pitcher's movements in baseball.
野球のピッチャーとバッター。およそ 0.5 秒で 18.44 メートルの距離を飛んでくるボールを打つために、バッターはピッチャーのフォームやボールの出だしの角度から球の軌跡を予測する。逆にピッチャーはフォームや球種を使ってバッターの予測を裏切ろうとする。この感覚を日用品を使って別の動きに置き換えると、目をつぶる、目をつぶる。ピッチャーはボールの代わりに腕を2回振った後、サスペンダーを引く。バッターはそのタイミングをピッチャーの肩に触れた手から予測し、サスペンダーを叩こうとする。これは空振り。赤いところを叩ければホームラン。これはホームラン。
野球の魅力ってこう速い球を投げるとか、バッターだったら遠くにホームラン打つとかあると思うんですけど、それ以外にも本当に駆け引きっていうところにもすごい大きな魅力があって、でやっぱりそういう駆け引きでこう相手の裏をうまく読めたりするとすごい気持ちいい。ピッチャー投げてバッターが打つまで時間でいうと 0.4 から 0.5 秒ぐらいな時間なんですけど、そういったそのタイミングっていうのを、本当の野球だと目で見て、そのピッチャーのフォームであったりボールの速さからこれぐらいの時間で来るっていうのを、推測していたと思うんですけど、今回その一つのミソとしてはやはりこの、ピッチャー役というか人の肩をバッターの人が触るっていうことで、その距離をこう縮めたというか、視覚でタイミングを取るのをその触覚で違う感覚器具を使ってこうタイミングを測るっていうことがあってすごい面白いなと。こう経験してない人でも野球のその駆け引きの部分でのその勝敗というかの快感っていうのをこう得られると思うので、すごい面白い取り組みなんじゃないかなと。
The metaphor of touch takes us into the subjective experience of others that cannot be experienced literally. Despite not being trained as fencers, we can experience the essence of what it is like to handle a foil. Although we have not mastered the skill of hitting, we can sense a pitcher's psychological tactics. Using nonverbal metaphors help us see sports from the perspective of players and enables us to redefine what it means to watch sports. What, then, it is like to be inclusive? To design objects for and with people with disabilities is not enough. It is to include their point of view, living as a minority in wider society into making process. The disability can be catalyst to disrupt our understanding of what was thought to be normal. Creativity follows the awareness of difference. So that's all. Thank you so much. Goodbye.